This is what's left of the old protest camp set up along Entrenchment Creek that was raided by police earlier this year, a raid that would result in the death of an activist named Tortuguita. And because so few people have actually examined this case, looked at the body cam footage, and gone step by step to see what led up to his killing, I figured that I might as well. So I actually looked in the video and found pretty much exactly where I feel that the shooting happened. And from the looks of it, it looks like these officers came to the main parking lot and made their way down the very visible trail heading towards Entrenchment Creek. Along the way, they started tearing up tents, and as they passed through the woods, at around 3:30, you see the first example of this, they grab twigs, and they do that. They snap them to get them out of their way, and at around 20:50 you hear somebody remark, "suppressed fire," after pretty clearly seeing someone snap a twig. So you can see these officers are all very jumpy.
That sounded like suppressed gunfire.
And naturally, this might have actually led up to the shooting. So as the officers approach the creek bed right over here, the opposite side of which is the old prison farm, this is where the initial campsite was set up, and Tortuguita was probably about a quarter mile down this way. Groups divided amongst the police. And to the left, which went down that way, I'll call it Group A, and that was the group responsible for the shooting, and Group B went down this way. They remarked, they get to have all the fun as they came down here to destroy 2 tents.
They get to have all the fun.
Yeah, we're going to spread out now after the bag.
Throw that damn bag. I'm old now, bro. He used to caught me like 3 years ago.
Nice little catapult.
That puts you go straight up in the air.
And on the way, you can actually see one of the tents that they destroyed a little bit earlier in the video has a backpack with what they called sabotage materials in it. A torch, a few nails, could have just been camping supplies.
Right here.
So, you say you saw somebody over here with SUV?
Either way, the two groups separate right along the creek and continue out into the woods where shots are later heard. And this is actually a pretty good landmark because initially this trail wasn't very well marked. This is more of a protester trail, and it goes a little bit inland from the main trail leading along Entrenchment Creek.
It's like a free day for them.
Hey, guys. That tent right there. Hey, guys. Hey. Tent.
And you can see the guys heading up into the woods to the right here to go destroy a tent. I'll put that video in now. And these are the groups of people who only heard the shooting. Naturally, nobody in Group A had their camera turned on. At around 18 minutes, 9 seconds, you can see officers tearing up a tent right here in this clearing, and these are officers from Group B. Group A, again, responsible for the shooting. None of them really had a camera on them, and they hear 4 shots fired in rapid succession, and one of them is heard to say, "Damn, is that target practice?" Now, that isn't really a sick joke, because as far as I can tell, they actually do have a firing range near here, but immediately after the 4 shots, you hear at least 27 others. It starts out as somebody mag dumping, but then multiple officers are heard firing into the tent. I'll put a clip of that in the video now.
Oh, shit. Is this target practice?
Initial accounts of the shooting were kept intentionally very vague. I heard that Tortuguita fired one shot and hit the officer and then was killed by over a dozen shots. In reality, what you hear are 4 very clear shots and an exchange of gunfire from a separate gun after a very short delay, which is at least 27 shots. So after a couple of shots, you can hear several different officers getting in on that, and at a minimum, 30 shots were fired into that tent. Now, the officers from Group B, who said that Group A gets to have all the fun, started moving quickly along this path to try to meet up with the other officers and surround the green tent that formerly had a living Tortuguita inside of it. And then they started to fire non-lethal rounds, basically on the ground and then immediately into the tent. And a couple other things happened in that altercation, which I think are very interesting and show a little bit to the nature of police techniques. So for a minute or two after the initial shooting, officers in this clearing over here took cover behind trees as they slowly began to realize that live fire was being exchanged. At around 1950, officers were told over the radio that the coast was clear, so they pretty much immediately knew that Tortuguita had been killed in this exchange of gunfire, and they began to move further down Entrenchment Creek. At around 20 minutes exactly, they notify themselves of crossfire, and it seems that there are murmurs at around this time that friendly fire was probably exchanged.
Where?
At around 20 minutes exactly, they notify themselves of crossfire, and it seems that there are murmurs at around this time that friendly fire was probably exchanged.
Hey, watch crossfire, guys. Crossfire, watch the crossfire. Stay online. Stay online.
And 20 seconds later, at around 20:20, officers from the second group that heard the shooting began to move in on the tent. And you can see that at 20:30, 10 seconds after that, you hear someone say, "See the two across there?" Again, officers have encircled that tent, exposing themselves to friendly fire if another shooting follows.
See the 2 of them across there?
Okay.
Twigs are heard snapping, leading an officer to think it's a silenced pistol. In fact, at 20:50, you hear an officer say, "No, that sounded like suppressed gunfire." You hear more cracking of twigs, and a separate officer agrees with him, saying that it was suppressed fire.
No, that sounded like suppressed gunfire.
Then in this clearing up here, at around 21 minutes 13 seconds, the officer wearing the body cam, or at least an officer very close to him, is heard saying, "You fucked your own officer up."
You fucked your own officer up.
It's kind of becoming known to this group of police that there might have been an exchange of friendly fire. At 22 minutes 55 seconds, the officer wearing the body camera rests behind a tree, and other officers are also seen doing this. You can see them taking cover.
Go, it's closed, Sarge.
At about 23 minutes 49 seconds, you hear what sounds like a suppressed shot, followed by all officers on the far end of the semicircle now around the tent screaming. I haven't heard much about the mention of suppressed weapons, but it's been mentioned in the video and sounds pretty clear here. Officers are naturally incredibly jumpy at this point, and by 28 minutes 9 seconds, you hear another single shot fired. This sounds like a shot from a gun. And not too long after this, there's an exchange of fire, or rather a single direction of fire, of non-lethal rounds into the tent. At 30 minutes and 50 seconds, there's a discussion again about crossfire, and someone asks if there are officers on the opposite side of the clearing where a firing might take place, and immediately there's a lot of rabble-rousing. You know, they think that there might be another gun exchange, and the officers on the opposite end of the circle around this tent are naturally very afraid, because if cops start shooting, they're going to hit them.
other side? Here. We got too many. Hey, listen. What I'm saying. Everyone is back here, so we need to shift. Everyone is back here. So if y'all shoot from that side, there's more officers over here. So we need to shift back to this side of the tent.
At 32 minutes, 45 seconds, police shout to the tent, which now likely has a dead body inside of it, that they have a police dog and to leave now or else he'll be bit. You hear a little bit of discussion saying there's no way we're really going to have to use a police dog, and then they shout, fuck around, find out.
Police, if you're in the green tent, come out with your hands up.
Police! If you in that tent, come out!
The dog will bite you.
Police, stay out, come out. You will be bit.
Yeah, y'all take over. Police, K9, or you will be bit. Fuck around, and you're gonna find out.
At 34 minutes 25 seconds, APD begins firing less than lethal rounds on the ground in front of the tent and then into the tent directly. About 12 rounds are fired, and they say that it is pepper ball agent.
Again, this is Atlanta Police Department with a less lethal agent that will be administered into the tent if you do not come out with your hands up. Cover me, Doug. Come out with your hands up! That's four.
1813 Sergeant Hill to command. Administering less lethal to a green tent. We have shot 4 rounds.
This is certainly not Tortuguita's tent, but it seems to be in the clearing where the shooting actually took place, which is why I'm kind of walking here. At around 36 minutes, 40 seconds, officers began moving in on this clearing after firing pepper agent, and there's a bit of a discussion with one of the officers saying you'd hear coughing if he was still in there.
Good job.
And they move in, and they immediately begin moving backwards because the officers begin coughing at their own pepper agent. At around 37 minutes, 40 seconds, they, after kind of making a egress, they talk to another officer who has, I think, the Alabama flag patch showing that he's an out-of-stater, or, you know, he moved in from out of state, and he says they're shooting their own men. We don't know if we got shot by a deputy, and then he's cut off and he is told, no, the first one, it sounded suppressed. We heard like 3 rounds. At least that's what I heard. And then the officer who said, you're shooting your own men, kind of looked blankly at them and turned away.
They shoot their own man?
Huh? We don't know where you got shot by a deputy. The first thing we need to...
The first one, they say was suppressed. That's from them. First like 3 rounds, and then that's what heard. Start shooting. 5 to 6 rounds. Yeah. First shot from there. Where's he down at? Shot coming through. It's right here, right on the edge of his.
So what do I think honestly happened? I think that the officers broke up into 2 groups heading down from the parking lot once they hit Entrenchment Creek, with Group B heading down into the direction of the woods about a quarter mile down the creek, where they were disassembling a couple of tents. Group A encountered Tortuguita, and there were already murmurings of possible suppressed gunfire because they heard themselves cracking twigs, and somebody unloaded 4 shots into the tent, possibly striking one of the officers in the thigh. Now, this also negates the fact that they claim that the bullet fired from the gun that struck the officer didn't match the officer's gun, but there were multiple officers present, and we don't have confirmation from independent researchers, even though Tortuguita's family is now trying to do an independent autopsy that seems to suggest that maybe the bullet didn't come from Tortuguita's gun, because when he was found, shots were going through his hands that seemed to correspond with shots that entered his head, meaning that he was kind of cowering. So, in any case, a gunfire was exchanged and he was shot many, many times, partly because the police were incredibly jumpy, and immediately after the shooting, police were pretty suspicious that they had struck their own officer, and a lot of people think that they might have lied on the forms. There's no independent way to prove this. I just hope that whatever investigation follows is impartial, and as far as I can tell, the shooting took place more or less in this clearing right here, down the way from the fork in the trail at Entrenchment Creek.